104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. We are very honored to be joined by the studio host for TBS's coverage of Major League Baseball playoffs. Last night, he was the host during the Jays' win over the Orioles. Casey Stern with us. Casey, why didn't the Orioles throw Zach Britton?
This is probably one of the unanswerable questions ever. I feel like the old Robert Stack hosted Unsolved Mysteries music should be playing in the background, and across the screen fronts the word missing, because I have no idea. I think two reasons. I think one is, Buck, despite he's one of the best managers in the game, has been a long time, has the I'm the smartest guy in the room and I know more than everybody else syndrome at times. And I think the other part is just complete stubbornness about the old school way, about getting a closer into a game, tied if you're at home and with a lead if you're on the road. And that whole idea is absolutely absurd because it's a Game 7 mentality. I mean, if it's August 8th, sure, that makes sense. But in a game where basically you win or go home, to not have the best pitcher, not only on your team, that's the best pitcher on either baseball team, to not have him on the mound was a complete disaster. And I think it was the worst managerial move we've seen anyone make this year, and one of the worst we've ever seen in the postseason.
I don't know what I was more stunned by. I'm an Orioles fan. Britton not getting into the game, or then the post-game coverage. And your co-hosts there, Gary Sheffield and Pedro Martinez, didn't criticize the move. Were you surprised by that? The major leaguers weren't even criticizing it?
I don't think so, only because of the fact, and to their credit, and I love those guys, I think sometimes when you're on the field all the time and you've been through all of this, and Pedro lived through the Grady Little situation, I think you're more numb to it maybe than we are. The other part is I think because of the fact that they have a high level of respect for Buck Showalter, it may be more difficult to not play devil's advocate. That being said, I did not have a hard time giving my 2 cents on it. It was hard not to, to be quite honest with you, just lay out Buck. I mean, this was a scenario where during the game, what I said in the postgame was legitimately true. When Ubaldo Jimenez came into the game, we were sitting there in the viewing room watching, and J-Roll had his shoes off and his jacket off and was all comfortable. And I told him he better go get dressed because we were going out on set in the next couple of minutes because I knew the game was over.
Casey Stern, he's the host for the studio for TBS. So, Casey, let me ask you a complete speculative question. Is this the kind of move or non-move that could cost Buck Showalter his job?
No, I don't think so, not in itself. I mean, look, if this was Terry Collins, it would be the last straw. They would have given him a code red live on television and sent him out to some other foreign country. I mean, I don't know what would have happened to him. I think with Buck, the one thing it does is, and I was talking to one of his former players this morning actually about this, is I think it takes the bulletproof vest off. I think that's what it is. I think when you look at guys like Buck, and I would put Mike Scioscia in this category, who I don't think is as good a manager as Buck is, but the two guys who maybe have more security outside of Bruce Bochy, who obviously deserves it, more security than anybody in the major leagues in terms of they'd get a lifetime contract, you would think, from ownership to stay there. I think that is how this changes. I think going into next season now, guys, every time that Buck makes any decision, it is going to be chastised if it's bad, and people are going to go back and look at this. So I think it gets you more on the path towards someday getting to that point. I think it begins to kind of build a frustration that now you look ahead to, where he's not a guy going into spring training who's going to have house money as a manager, but I don't think he'll be on a hot seat necessarily, no.
Levack and guys on 104.5 The Team, hanging out with Casey Stern, the studio host for TBS's coverage of the Major League Baseball playoffs.
Tonight's the National League game, Mets versus Giants. What can we expect in the matchup?
Well, I would say good pitching. I think we can say that. You've got one of the best young pitchers in the game, obviously, in Syndergaard. And, last year, I think even more than in his start and the situation with Alcides Escobar, the scenario where he came out of the pen in the 8th inning, I think it was, or 7th against the Dodgers. I think we saw that this is a guy who clearly has the mettle to get it done in big spots. But you're facing the best big game pitcher of our generation. I mean, that's what this guy is. I mean, Kershaw's the best pitcher in baseball. We've seen others, Schilling, Beckett, Pettit, and those over the last 2 decades really get it done. But to be honest with you, Mariano Rivera and Madison Bumgarner are the 2 best big game pitchers that we've seen in the last 20, 30 years. So I think you've got to get them early. The key for the Mets is if you're going to win this game, you have to get them early. If you talk to hitters about pitchers like this, If Bumgarner settles in, forget about it. So if they get first and second with one out in the first inning, that may be your shot. You better find a way to get runs in. And I think if they can get Syndergaard the lead, they'll be in good shape. On the other side, if the Giants can get a bloop and, let's say, a Posey blast early, even a 2-0 lead with that guy on the mound could be insurmountable for that team.
Casey, we're your home for New York sports. Lots of Mets fans listening and, hoping they can punch their ticket, get to that bullpen against Madison Bumgarner maybe. If they were able to do that, do you think they could compete with the Cubbies?
Oh, man. On paper, clearly not. I mean, and I know Mets fans think because they swept them last year and did well in the regular season that they could just continue it on. And hopefully the team would have the same kind of confidence. I think really the key, and we always talk about game one in a 5-game in a short series, but this is really where it's paramount. If the Mets can go ahead and win a game one and somehow steal it against Lester, who's a Cy Young candidate this year in Chicago, all of a sudden you've got a team, guys, who's like 40 million games over 500. They weren't ever tested in their division. They haven't really played a meaningful game the entire season because they coasted. And at least you get that guys in that room where finally the press is asking them negative questions for the first time in 6 months. You're getting a team that now would have lost 5 straight games against these guys, most of them outside of Murphy the same, going back to last year. And I think you bring seeds of doubt into game 2. That's the only shot they have. If they lost game 1 in that series, it might only go 3.
With all that being said about the Cubs, plus the fact that they haven't won a World Series since 1908, do you still consider them the favorite in the postseason?
They have to be. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to win, but they have to be. If you're going based on paper, I mean, everybody tries to predict things, and we all get asked these predictions, and I think all of us want to be smart, and we all want to have like the Buck Showalter syndrome where we're like, we know something everybody doesn't, so we pick these other teams because we want to be right. But if we went based on logic, everyone would pick the Cubs. This is the best regular season team to enter the playoffs in this sport since Joe Torre's Yankees in the late 90s, and that's not an over-exaggeration. They are deep in rotation with 3 top 5 or 6 Cy Young candidates. And the fourth guy in John Lackey has just been brilliant in the postseason now for a decade and a half. You've got a bullpen which has so many different guys. They can get you left side, right side, all the way leading up to Chapman, as dominant as any closer in the game. Their bench is ridiculous. They're going to have 3 catchers they can use. They've got guys like Contreras and Baez and others like Bryant, for example, their MVP and best player, who all play different positions so they can move guys around. And they've got a manager in Joe Madden who's the right guy to be able to handle all of that. So you're in an uphill climb. I think really they'd be much more scared of the Giants. You get Cueto in game 1, and then if you're even in somehow 1-1 situation in San Francisco, you're going into, I think, the toughest place to play in the playoffs in this sport, and the guy on the mound would be Madison Bumgarner in game 3. So I think the Cubs would be scared a little bit facing the Giants in a short series, even year, the track record, Bochy, and all of that. If they get past this short series, I expect them to be in the World Series. I think the Dodgers are way better than people think. I think Dusty will have the Nationals ready even without the injuries, but the Cubs, to me, will I won't say easily, but I think the Cubs would beat either of those teams.
TBS's Casey Stern right here on 104.5, the team of Levack and Gaz. So, Casey, if the Cubbies are going to the World Series to the National League, what's the matchup and who prevails on the American League? What's interesting you the most on the AL side?
Well, I think there's so many different dramatic elements. I mean, you got Tito against Poppy now with the Indians. You know, the Indians being at home was kind of a forgotten thing people didn't pay attention to. When the Jays won their last game, everybody concentrated on them making the playoff and Big Poppy's final game, but it put the Indians at home, which puts them in a better spot. But I still think they got too many injuries, losing Salazar and Carrasco. I think the Red Sox will beat them. As far as the other series, it's going to be like an NFL game between 2 rivals where you say it goes down to the 4th quarter because they just hate each other so much and there's such a history. So I think it'll go 5. But I think Texas will reverse what happened last year and this time be able to close them out. And I like the Rangers. I've got the Rangers going the whole way. I was with them a lot during spring training, spent about 10 days with them. I mean, this is a team that I think really has all of the elements and the Beltre and Beltran types who have been there in the postseason, a Cole Hamels who's dominated at the front end. They've got, I think, a bullpen that could be questioned because of the lack of success at times this year, but they certainly have the arms to get it done. And I'm just a true believer in Texas. I think the irony of this year will be that the whole story was about the Cubs and reversing a curse or whatever you want to say about, you know, the many, many decades they haven't won. And what will end up happening is the team's going to sneak up and win their first World Series ever, and that's going to be the Rangers.
That is a bold prediction, and we love it. Casey Stern, he is the studio host for TBS. You're sometimes you look like Big John McCarthy in the middle of a UFC match in there with all the craziness going on. What?
Yeah, the only difference is Roy Nelson didn't kick me after, which is good.
Casey, what does TBS have moving forward? What games are you guys on top of?
We'll be we got a doubleheader tomorrow, so I'll be on 4:00 Eastern time is our pregame, leading into Hamilton half. Two former teammates with the Phillies. Who will be going against each other. And then we've got the second game, which will be Trevor Bauer against Cy Young, I would say probably favorite, Rick Porcello in the American League. So we'll have pregame, we'll be on in between, and then postgame for that. And then the following day, our doubleheader begins on Friday at 12:30 Eastern time, because the first one is a 1:08 first pitch for the Ranger game. So we're busy the next couple of days. Today's the easy one. We watch the NL take place and get to watch Bumgarner and Thor. But we'll be busy from that point out, and then obviously we'll hit the road as we always do for the championship series.
All right, man. We appreciate your time. Get some rest while you can. You've got some officiating to do in the near future.
I look forward to it. I'll be like Dennis Leary in The Ref. I'll be on my game tomorrow. Don't worry.
Thanks, Casey.
Anytime, guys. You know it. Stay well. We'll talk again soon. Okay.